we don't expand our imagination.
Justification for being what you are.
And welcome to Washington Unplugged. I'm Bill Plante. In his State of the Union message, President Obama charted a path forward while confronting a newly divided government. He suggested new spending cuts. He advocated increased investments for education, mass transit, and infrastructure. In the response, Congressman Paul Ryan fired back with the Republican points focusing on government spending and the national debt. And then there was Michele Bachmann, who was looking at the wrong camera, but she had a few things to say during her Tea Party response. All in all, a very interesting night. And to help us sort it out now for a political roundtable, Politico's Andy Barr, contributing editor for the Loop21.com, Keli Goff, and our senior political producer, Rob Hendin. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Did the president's speech succeed in putting the Republicans in a corner, which is apparently what the White House is hoping?
According to the poll numbers, it looks like he did. I mean, I think some of the poll numbers that jumped out at me immediately after his State of the Union address, you had the CBS poll, which showed that the number of Americans who are confident in his plan for the economy jumped to something like 83%, which is about a 30-point increase over the number of Americans who felt that way before the speech. But something else that jumped out at me was another poll from CNN, which showed that the number of Americans who now feel optimistic about the direction this country is headed is 77%. It has not been that high in ages. So these are really, really good numbers for the president and an improvement over last year.
Andy, what about the people who say it was kind of flat?
Well, I was going to say there's that, and you have to look at the turf that he's playing on now. We're talking about recycling promises of spending freezes. I mean, a lot of what he's playing on is playing into the message. And what we don't know coming out of that from either the Republicans or the president is where they're going to look to work together. We're hearing the same rhetoric from both that we did right after the election. And what that State of the Union didn't really map out, what they're going to be doing for the next few months. We still don't have a playbook of what that's going to look like.
Right. And Rob, not enough details. Should he have laid out more details?
Well, some budget watchers have told us that they expected more details, but I think what the president did, what was so kind of brilliant, was lay out the battle lines for a game he's playing with the Republicans without ever coming out saying the game is on. He really set a trap for them, saying these are what's important. We're going to protect infrastructure and invest in spending and education we need to for the future of the country. And then let the Republicans say we're going to cut everything, which is what they basically did.
And prove themselves to be the party of no, right, which is what they've been running away from. I also think that it's worth noting that the people that he was getting high points from were not just Democrats, even though polling for State of the Union tends to focus on those who are watching, and watchers tend to be the party of the president giving the speech, I think about 2-1. But what's interesting is you look at the New York Post, which has never been accused of being a big supporter of President Obama, and their headline today was "The King's Speech," a play on the Academy Award-nominated film, and then it says, "Bam pleads for unity." Those are good marks. Someone else who gave him high marks, Christine O'Donnell, not exactly a big fan of the president. Her only criticism was she felt that he was stealing too many of the great ideas from the Tea Party. So this is really potentially a game changer.
Sure, but it was aspirational, wasn't it? There are no hard, cold
I mean, just look
ideas.
through what we talked about last year of the State of the Union and this year, and it's a lot of the same stuff. In addition to that, we're talking about him stealing ideas from the Tea Party. Do you think Democrats are really happy with him stealing ideas from the Tea Party? Just look at the territory he's playing on. Look at what Republicans are talking about. They're not rebutting ideas. They're saying, yes, we agree, but we think we need to cut spending and all this other stuff. He's very much playing on their turf, and that's a troubling spot for him to be in.
We agree on the ideas and not so much on the logistics and execution.
Well, Rob, there were, of course, two responses to this speech. How would you rate, first of all, the Republican response from Paul Ryan?
I thought Paul Ryan gave a very sober analysis of what the budget situation looks like, and just by default, no response ever is really a good thing to do if you're an aspiring politician. Ask Bobby Jindal. But I think the president was so positive. He came in smiling. He was very relaxed, unlike last year, unlike his joint session on healthcare. He was the master of ceremonies last night, a couple of jokes here and there. It was really a nice mood. And I think what Paul Ryan did was kind of come out and didn't mean to be really somber, but he was.
It may be the first time in the history of State of the Union messages that they've ever mentioned smoked fish.
Yes, exactly. And I think that Ryan came out, and he's one of the most respected members of the Republican caucus. He's their go-to guy in the budget, but he just did not really give a lot of people any confidence. And then Bachmann came out, and he mentioned she looked at the wrong camera. She was talking to the Tea Party Express website. She didn't realize that CNN and Fox were taking her remarks live, where she's looking off camera, and she just looked kind of just out of it.
Well,
I was going to say there's something so telling about what we're talking about with this today. No one's talking about what Ryan said last night. It's all Bachmann, right? I mean, this is a disaster for them. The face of the response is Michele Bachmann. This is exactly what they didn't want. In fact, they passed her over, and that's why she had to go to Tea Party Express.
Well, as Bob Schieffer made the point very well yesterday, the Republicans seem to be afraid to try and shut her down.
Yeah, they don't really have any answer to that. Yeah.
Right,
because she can just go around them.
And they can't afford the backlash, right? Sort of it's another version of the Palin problem. You know, look, I will say this much: all of the statistics I was studying before this interview, the main thing I was focused on is look at the right camera, look at the right camera, look at the right camera. After the disaster that was last night, it looked a little bit like a cable access show, didn't it? It was very strange watching her
But also,
response.
who was her priority? It was Tea Party Express. She knew there was another camera there. Yeah. Her priority was Tea Party Express.
And that really shows what the problem is for John Boehner in this debate about spending, because they want to be able to take on the Tea Party, but they can't. And that some of these new members of the Tea Party, a lot of the Tea Party people in the country, do not understand how difficult it is to actually cut spending. And the Republicans now have to have some kind of balance, where Boehner can say, we're going to cut spending, but try to do it in a responsible way. They're never going to be able to reach the levels that the Tea Party demands of them.
Or their own promises.
Or their own promises. And so that's where they really don't know how to handle the Bachmanns of the world. And Bachmann says, well, we don't really need you. We're just going to go right to our people.
But neither party, and none of the people who spoke last night laid out a strategy for really cutting spending. I mean, yeah, we're all for it. Let's cut. But how?
You're right, but we're forgetting one very important thing, which I thought Roger Simon did a brilliant column for Politico laying this out, which is that very few people actually remember the State of the Union address, ever. Not a week later, not a month later, not even a year later. And he challenged all of us to try to remember a single line from a State of the Union address, ever. And I think all of us remember the same one, which was axis of evil, right? And, you know, and so few people remember the State of the Union address, even fewer remember the response to the State of the Union address. So a lot of this is fun for us and important for the jobs that we do, but in terms of how this actually plays out long term, the specifics and the impact it'll have, I think that's questionable. Gallup had a poll that showed that State of the Unions never move the needle for presidents. It doesn't. So,
well, but you spoke earlier about it moving the needle for this president.
Last night, but in terms of long-term impact on their electability.
I think you're touching
right?
on like the issue here. The big takeaway for both the president and Republicans is we need to cut, right? But there's no indication of, not only are you saying how, but what?
Right.
You know, that's the big question. Right. You know, there are all these massive programs. We're talking about an across-the-board spending freeze, which they promised last year didn't happen, which there's no indication is going to happen this year. Like, what's actually going to be?
But if they took $400 billion out of the budget for the next 10 years, they'd still be spending $45 trillion, I think is the number.
Right, and there's no promise to look at the things that are really costing them the most money.
$400 billion, $45 trillion, hello.
Well, you start small. You start small.
Well, we were joking yesterday that the president should have started the speech saying, I'm going to speak in broad generalities tonight because, honestly, specifics are hard. Like, it's not something where he was going to get up and litigate specific programs. And he didn't give a nod to Secretary Gates, who's pledged to cut $100 billion from the defense budget. And even then, he had Republican blowback because some of the programs he wants to cut are made in districts that are represented by Republicans, and they're made by Americans. And those are jobs that the country really cannot afford to lose.
But it's not even clear if they know what they want to cut. It's one thing to not say what you want to cut. It's another thing to not know what you want to cut.
But everybody knows that they have a problem.
Right.
Yes.
Well, and everyone's in agreement that something has to be cut. That's the good news, right? Christine O'Donnell, the president, we're all in agreement on that.
Well, I don't know what to cut either, so maybe we should leave it there. I want to thank you all for joining us. Rob Hendin, Keli Goff, and Andy
Barr.
There
you go.
I had it in my head, but it went somewhere. That's like the State of the Union address.
Right, by tomorrow, none of us will remember it. We'll be talking about the snow.
Okay, thank you all. That's it from Washington Unplugged. Join us again tomorrow for this week's Flashpoints with CBS News Justice correspondent Bob Orr and Senior National Security Analyst Juan Zarate, right here on CBSNews.com. I'm Bill Plante. Have a great day.